I'm a big fan of cubes. Almost any kind of cube gets my juices flowing. I like sugar cubes, nice in my tea. Rubik's cubes, they keep me humble and remind me how stupid I am. Dice are cubes, and you can't have a cold drink without ice cubes. Am I right? I like bouillon cubes for my soup. I like jello cubes for dessert. And have I told you about that weird black cube that showed up in my basement that throbs like a heartbeat in my brain whenever I mention its existence to anyone? That's a fun cube. What I'm trying to say is, if it's a cube, I'm here for it. So when LITNXT said they were making a new device with a square screen at a super cheap budget price, and most importantly, it had cube in the name, I was like, oh heck yeah. I love cubes, and I'm totally gonna get that and play games on it and try to ignore the disturbing secrets that the dark cube whispers to me right as I'm falling asleep every night. And then I did get it, and I did play games on it, and I like it a lot. Believe it or not, this is my new favorite square screen device. And if you like retro games, and if you don't have a square screen device, then you probably should click away from this video, because I'm going to tell you why you need a square screen device. And you're going to agree and want to buy this. So you have been warned. I wish I was warned about things. And if you do end up wanting one of these bad boys, then you should buy one from LITNXT. They send this to me to share with you. They're a good store with good prices, and they have a sale on right now where you can save 12% on this or any other retro doodad. And there's a link in the thingy below. First things first, we need to address the elephant in the room, the stupid name. CubeXX. LITNXT sucks at names, so I give these things way better names. First we had the Bizazzle, and then this is the Big Zazzle, and then we got the Zazbizzle, and then the Zazbiggle, and the Zazbiddy, and the flip version is the Flipzizzle, and now we have the square version, the CubeXX, which will hence herewith be known as the Squazizzle. You know, like a square Zazbizzle, Squazizzle. That's what you gotta call it. So, spread the word. The Squazizzle is powered by the H700 processor, which is the same chipset that we've seen used in all of LITNXT's recent budget devices from the XX line. And unlike the dark cube in my basement, it won't tempt you with promises in exchange for just a little more blood. So that's good. On the front, we have a screen, D-pad in the upper configuration, sticks down below, face buttons over here, start and select down here, and a menu button. Up top, we have bumpers and triggers, and a power button, volume up and down, and a USB-C hole for charging, and a reset button, and a mini HDMI hole for video out. Underneath, we have dual downward firing stereo speakers, and an SD card hole for the system card, and a headphone hole, and another SD card hole for the games card. Nothing on the sides. Around back, we have some curvy ergonomic humps with some grippy bits to squeeze, and an LITNXT logo, and a few drops of blood, I guess. Huh. That's weird. How'd that get there? Square screen devices are few and far between, and we only have a few options. First, there's the RGB30, which started this whole square screen craze. It's about the same size from the front, but the Squazizzle is quite a bit thicker because of those ergonomic humps. And then we have the ZPG Unicorn, which I haven't reviewed yet, but I plan to soon. That has a bit more curves than the RGB30, but not nearly as much as the Squazizzle. And then there is this guy, the RGB20SX. And even though it has a square screen, it's not really at all like the Squazizzle. And we do actually have one more square screen device, LITNXT's own RG Nano. This thing is tiny and really isn't at all like the Squazizzle. So I don't know why I showed you that. I'm just getting confused, I think. I haven't been sleeping well lately for some reason. The main device that we need to compare the Squazizzle with is the RG Cube. These may look similar, because they are, but the RG Cube is a T820 device, which is a pretty high-end processor. This thing can do like GameCube and PS2 and stuff. The Squazizzle can't do high-end stuff like that. It maxes out at PS1 and Dreamcast and N64. So think of the RG Cube as LITNXT's high-end Android device with a square screen, and the Squazizzle is their low-end budget device with a square screen. The main change that I'm excited about with the Squazizzle is that they did it in the retro colorway. It's superficial, I know, to get excited about a device just because of the color of the thing. I'm excited for more reasons than that, but you guys know I'm all about the retro Game Boy Color vibe when it comes to my doodad, so this made me happy. They also have a really cute looking white one with all white D-pad and buttons and stuff, and a black one, of course, because black goes with everything, even cubes. Cubes of pure darkness that suck all the light from your life, leaving only a black void where happiness used to be. It may not look as clean and slick as the RGB30, for instance, because of the lack of straight lines. This thing is full of curves all over the place, but I actually kind of like that here. Makes it look more like a toy. I mean, all these things are toys. Let's be real here. We're a bunch of grown children playing with toys after all. But I'm more okay with something looking like a toy when it's not a top-end device that's made to play higher-end stuff. And if you're thinking, TechDweeb, shouldn't you do something about that mysterious cube that's probably the cause of all the neighborhood cats mysteriously vanishing? Well, I tried, but it hurt, and I'm scared. And if you're also thinking that the Squazizzle looks comfy as heck with all those curves, then you're 100% right. It is. I love the feeling of this thing. The size is great, it fills out my hands nicely, and the position of the D-pad and buttons is just right. It's so comfy to hold and use even for extended sessions. I love having this thing in my hands. In terms of pocket potential, I'm going to say that yes, you can carry this thing around in your pocket. Those curvy humps make it a bit bulkier than would be perfectly comfortable, but it's not like you can't put it in a pocket and even carry it around hither and thither. I also like that it has a flat bottom and it can stand up on a table like a little TV. That makes me happy for some reason. Happiness is a precious thing. Cherish it, because it could be taken away from you in an instant, as the dark cube constantly reminds me. The controls are mostly a home run, or if you're not into football, I'll just say the controls are mostly really good. The D-pad is incredible. It's the rolling style D-pad, which means it's less ideal for traditional D-pad stuff like platformers, even though it's still good for that stuff, but it is amazing for specific types of games like fighting games, and I find that this style D-pad is also great for shooter games and really any arcade game. It has a great feel to it, lovely pivot, and the size is just right for a device like this. The buttons are great. They're quite sticky-outy, but they have a good amount of travel and satisfying feedback, and I really like the way they feel under my thumb. Good feeling bumpers and triggers too, not too loud, and they're good shape and comfy to use. The sticks are one misstep, as usual with these XX devices. They're not accurate, they have cardinal snapping. I honestly don't care. They're about average quality for a cheap device like this, and these will be fine for most retro games, but if you're expecting perfect Dreamcast or N64 stick action, you're gonna be disappointed. Oh, and they have RBG, if you're into that. I'm not, so I just turned that off. We have downward firing stereo speakers on this bad boy, and they actually sound pretty darn good. It's not going to win the Best Audio Ever award, but for the price and size of this thing, I was actually impressed at how it sounded. The stock OS is good. There are horrors in this world beyond our understanding. But here on the Squazizzle, we get a nice, easy to navigate front end. You can browse your games and launch your games. Most of the systems are pre-set up to have custom bezel artwork and have the screen scaling all set. I don't agree with all the choices they made, but it's easy enough to tweak any that you don't like. And when you're in your game, you can press the menu button to bring up the options where you can adjust things like turning off the on-screen overlay and changing the scaling options. You can save and load your state, and you can exit your game, and you'll be taken right back to the menu. And there's also some system options where you can adjust the device theme and change the RBG on the sticks and open up RetroArch to tweak those options. However, those who know me well know that I'm a weak man without the bravery to stand up to eldritch horrors, and also I'm a big fan of a custom operating system called Newly. Newly is a fork of Batocera that is made to run on retro handhelds. They have an alpha build that runs on the Squazizzle, and it's freaking awesome. I was able to copy over all my games, including the scraped box art and the favorites list from my FlipZizzle, and it works amazing. It's really easy to install Newly. It's my favorite OS for these XX devices, and I made a guide which you can check out if you want to set this up yourself. I'm pretty sure that all these Square devices use the same screen. This is a 4-inch screen with a resolution of 720 by 720, which means we get a ton of pixels to work with for integer scaling options. So many systems can be run with integer scaling and be running at nearly the full width of the screen. But even for those that don't, if you scale them up and apply a lightweight interpolation shader, because the pixel density is so high, it's virtually indistinguishable from proper integer scaling. For example, if you run Game Boy with a 4x integer scaling, you can get a nearly full screen image, and you can apply a bezel to fill in the negative space if that's important to you. But if you scale it up with a sharp bilinear shader, then you'll get a full screen experience that looks like it's integer scaled. 4x3 stuff is great too, and even though it may look like the game is small on the screen, actually everything on here is just as wide as it is on a 3.5-inch screen, like the other XX devices. So you're not really missing out on anything, even if you're playing 4x3 stuff on here, even if that's not ideal for this screen. And there are other systems that are almost able to fully integer scale, like NES and Super Nintendo. And they're so close that you can apply integer scaling overscan and it'll crop off only like 4 pixels from each side of the screen. And these CRT systems never put anything important right on the edge of the screen, so now they're nice and big with pixel perfect integer scaling. I got my buddy Retro Game Corps to thank for that little tip. GBA has pixel perfect scaling, so we're good there. The main stuff that's not going to be ideal for this screen is the widescreen stuff. This thing can play lots of PSP, but I personally never really want to play PSP on when it's this small. Same thing with Virtual Boy. I know everyone loves Virtual Boy emulation, but this just isn't ideal for that system. For some reason, I can't see properly when I look in the mirror lately. My vision just goes all dark and cloudy. I'm pretty sure I'm still me though. It feels weird that I can't tell for sure, you know? You could totally get a Squazizzle and use it for all the old retro stuff and you'd have a grand time. Everything up to PS1 is going to be no problem at all. And like I said, you get amazing scaling options for that stuff. And for higher end stuff, you can play a bunch of Dreamcast and N64 and PSP on here. Not every game from those systems is going to play perfectly, but most will. The device itself is super comfy and retro feeling. It really ticks all the boxes. So if you're looking for a one-size-fits-all handheld and you like what you see here, then hey, I say go for it and don't look back. But I'm gonna be honest, I have other devices that I'd rather play most of that stuff on. Square ratio devices are really, really great at a few specific things, and I feel like every retro handheld enthusiast should consider a device like the Squazizzle for the stuff that's amazing on a square ratio device. So let's talk about that. Game Boy and Game Boy Color were nearly square ratio devices, and those games have never looked better than they do on square ratio devices like the Squazizzle. I gotta say, ever since I got into this retro doodad hobby, I've loved exploring the library of Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So many amazing games that I never got to play back in the day. Also, vertical arcade games. These games can take up the entire height of the screen, and with the bezel, it fills out the empty space on the sides. I am freaking nuts about vertical shooters. I love them, one of my favorite genres, but I rarely get to play them because on most devices, it's annoying to rotate the doodad and rebind the controls. They're all just set up perfectly here, and they work perfectly. Nintendo DS is pretty good as well, but here you can run the games with the screen stacked, and they're a decent size like this, so it's actually possible to play DS in the proper orientation here. And finally, my favorite thing to do on square ratio devices is play Pico 8. I have the native version of Pico 8 set up in Newly, so the games all work perfectly, and you get access to Splore, which is like a Pico 8 front end that lets you explore the featured games and download them right on the device. I'm nuts about Pico 8 games. So if you've been on the fence about a square device, but you're interested in Pico 8, then I think now is the time to consider getting something like the Squazizzle. I love the games that play well on here, and also it just helps me forget that there are dark things lurking in the shadows all around us, all the time. Things that whisper terrible things to me in the night, things that seem to want something, but I can't figure out what it is, and the longer that I wait to try to escape, the harder it gets. I've said before how much I like having devices that can be used as my go-to devices for specific systems. I love my Powkitty V10 because it's so dang good for GBA. I love my RG505 because it's the perfect PSP handheld. I like my Retroid Pocket 5 for high-end widescreen games like Android games and GameCube and PS2 with widescreen patches. And I've loved my RGB30 for square stuff like Game Boy and Game Boy Color and Pico 8. Feeding the darkness is the only way to avoid the headaches, but the Squazizzle is everything that I loved about the RGB30, but with much more comfortable controls and a more authentic retro vibe. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Squazizzle is a monumentous achievement in handheld tech or anything. It's not pushing the boundaries in any way. It has the same performance of all the other XX devices. There are other devices with square screens. Nothing new here really, but with that said, the Squazizzle has quickly become my new favorite square ratio device. I don't need high-end performance on a device that's ideal for Game Boy and Game Boy Color and Pico 8 and Vertical Arcade. I just need something that works well with a great build, comfy ergonomics, and the retro vibes. And this does it for me. And because I know I'm gonna get asked, no, I don't need help. I don't need you to save me from this madness, because the Dark Cube made it clear that if I ever did ask for help, then terrible things would happen to those I love most. So this is definitely not me begging for help. Everything is fine. And if you want a Squazizzle for yourself, you don't need to make a deal with dark powers from beyond the blackness of space and time. You can just get one from LITNXT. Their Thanksgiving sale is on until November 30th, and you can save 12% with free worldwide shipping. And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching and stuff. The topic of discussion today is square ratio devices. Do you love them? Hate them? Which is your favorite? What do you like to play? Should I succumb to the darkness that beckons me? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or don't if you didn't. That's it from me for today. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.